So welcome Youth Media Alliance members, guests, Adam, David, Maria, and Stephanie. As we are presenting this webinar with the Children Media Association, we have many people on the call who may not be familiar with the mission of the Youth Media Alliance. Bonjour aux membres de l'Alliance Média Jeunesse qui se joignent à cette première collaboration avec le groupe Children Media Association. The Youth Media Alliance is 46 years old, is a national not-for-profit organization with members from across the country, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Moncton, New Brunswick. We represent producer, creators, and broadcaster of kids content. The YMA mission is to lobby on behalf of these creative professionals to the Canadian government, participate in national studies, produce an annual conference and an annual award of excellence to celebrate the excellence in kids content in both languages. Oh, I forgot, we play dodgeball in Montreal and Toronto to raise funding. I invite you to follow the next YMA French Award of Excellence, which will be held on the web on our Facebook page on May 27 at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Now I turn over to Stephanie Sosa of the Children Media Association.
Thank you, Chantal. I'm Stephanie Sosa with Children's Media Association. We're a community that connects the dots across the children's industry. We have chapters in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and virtual members all around the world. We're makers, thinkers, and innovators who believe that by learning and playing together, we strengthen ourselves as well as the content that is created for children. And right now it's really exciting because we're actually offering 3 months of free membership. So we invite anybody that wants to check us out to get 3 months of free membership during this time. Also, I wanted to share a couple of things as well about today's webinar. Like for example, the slides that are going to be shown today, we're going to have those available to you if you email David, and his email will be on the very last slide, as well as we will put it in the chat area. And speaking of the chat area, if you have any questions for David and Adam throughout, please feel free to add it in the chat area, and Maria will be there monitoring the questions, and we'll have Q&A at the end. And final note is we are also recording this Zoom call if you saw the little red dot in the upper left corner. So we just want to give everybody a heads up about that. All right, without further ado, I want to introduce David Kleeman, who is Senior Vice President of Global Trends for Dubit and a board member, lucky for us, for Children's Media Association. Whoop, whoop. And he's joined in presenting today by Adam Woodgate, who is SVP of Media Insights and runs Dubit's Global Trends Survey. So without further ado, the wonderful, amazing, one-of-a-kind David Kleeman.
Thank you very much. I will show up for just a minute here on the camera, and then I'll put up my slides. But I want to say welcome and bienvenue to our friends both in Canada and the US and around the world. I'm looking at the chat area and seeing that we are getting participants from up and down the Americas and overseas as well. So I'm really pleased to be speaking today. Let me put my slides up and I'll start to tell you a little more. Thanks while I'm doing that to the YMA and the CMA for their generosity in hosting this for us. It came in late as an idea for them to present, and they've been most generous about putting everything together at the last minute. So the reason that Adam and I and Dubit wanted to do this is because we've just gotten back our most recent wave of our global trends study, and it went into the field a couple weeks into lockdown. So we really felt like it was an important time to look at some of the differences that we're seeing just in this wave as compared to a year-on-year comparison. So we can see how kids were behaving in those early weeks. Just to introduce you very briefly to Dubit Trends, we do this survey in 20 different countries, twice a year in the US and UK. So 2,000 children every 6 months, ages 2 to 15 in the US, 1,500 in the UK every 6 months, again, same ages. And for kids up to age 8, the parents complete it with the child either in the room helping them answer, or at least with the child in mind. Above age 8, the kids fill it out for themselves. We always have a special focus to trends when we go out with it. And this time we wanted to ask questions in specific about early response to coronavirus and to the lockdown, and whether kids were seeking information about it and such. And so we'll get to that later in the presentation about what we're seeing about how they're looking for information. So let's start with where we stand right now. And I think there are two things that need to be said about that. One is, from the perspective of the industry, we can't predict quite yet a lot of what's going to happen over the coming year to 2 years. We don't know yet, is this home confinement going to last another couple weeks? Is it going to last another couple months? Is there going to be a school season in the fall, in school and physically in school? So a lot of the questions, we are looking at what's happening in the early weeks. We're looking at what we've known over the last couple of years, and we're speculating a bit about how psychologically, developmentally, that's going to make a difference. But if we want to look at those early weeks from the perspective of the child, this is what we're seeing. Kids are consuming lots and lots of media, and they are basically saying, I finished everything on YouTube. When does the next season start? They're looking for new content to keep them engaged. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam Woodgate, who's going to present to you the results from trends about what we're seeing in changes in kids' use of media.
David, thank you. Let's take a look at the first slide here. So this is our US data. The focus of the charts is really the US. And this chart shows the average time per week children say they spend time on screens. So there's 4 key screens that they have access to: the TV, the tablet, the smartphone, the PC, desktop computer if you prefer, or laptop. And as you can see, in the United States, we are sitting 1 minute shy on average of 3 days per week on screens on average. So that's 71 hours, 59 minutes. Obviously, they can use screens concurrently. I'm here actually using my smartphone and my laptop, and we see that. So we know that that's a behavior. So some of this time is not necessarily happening in isolation. Some of it's happening concurrently. What we've seen is, in the US, for the last 3 years, or 3 years that we have on the chart, a steady increase in total screen time. And a lot of that's just driven by incremental growth. So you can see there, particularly in the pink area, the smartphones are up. But the big jump this time, what's really given it the kick to the 3 days mark, is the amount of time they're using PC laptops for. And that's up significantly compared to a couple of years ago in particular. Okay, now, one of the things we do then is we drill down into the activities that they do on the different screens. And this is a fairly easy one because the TV, even the connected TV, has 2 or 3 core uses, and then there's a whole host of other things that get done on the TV. So you can see the growth in time. It's carried over. We're just standing under a day with the television screen. And then within that, you can see the things they do. And we do it very simply and in the briefest of ways. Most people don't understand all the different variances of VOD or OTT. They hear all these phrases, they haven't got a clue, but they do get the fact that if it's not over the antenna or through the cable, it's streamed video. So they get that. So we tend to just keep it simple for them. You see what's happened is that there's been continued growth in streaming. We're up to nearly 8 3/4 hours right now in the US on streamed video. So that could be, your Netflix, your Disney Plus, but it's also advertising funded VOD services, and YouTube's in there, whole host of other things that they can get, streamed, more specialist stream services. And also recently the latest VOD that's been introduced, which is PVOD, the premium VOD, i.e. the fact that the movie companies couldn't get video out to or films out to the cinemas, so they gave it to the stores and people can watch that as well as they can do transactional video on demand. So that's growing. You can see linear has continued to decline. We're down at just over 6.25 hours a week on average. And when I say linear, that can be linear TV. So that's as likely to be ABC as Disney Channel or even Animal Planet. But the big growth this time is in other. You've got a jump of 55 minutes in other, which is an all-consuming category, which includes them playing video games through a console on the TV. They're still watching DVDs. We go into many homes where there's an archive of DVDs that they'll dig out. It's also those additional VOD platforms that I said before. And when we look at tablet, the big thing that we've seen is that obviously, you know, at the bottom there, you can see we show play games and watch video, and they dominate what kids are doing on tablets. You know, they're still, you know, the biggest amount of time that they spend is doing those two things. The thing that's changed this time is, you know, we've seen a little dip, in games, in playing games and in watching video, whilst other activities on the smartphone, on the tablet, beg your pardon, have continued to grow. You know, so games and videos marginally down 4% compared to a year ago, but learning activities, now that's taking, if we add, that's the orange, which is sorry, not the orange, it's the yellow, which is learning, and the light blue, which is homework. So educational activities now accounts for about 2.25 hours of time on a tablet, which is up 8% year on year. And then if you combine the two, it's up 36%. The other big thing that's grown that we know that kids are desperate for is social interaction. They actually really want to be with their friends, but the next best thing is social. And we've seen social grow, which is messaging and social network use, up 25% year on year. On the smartphone, again, the color scheme stays the same, but we also add in podcasts. And interestingly, the podcast is the biggest thing that's grown. And I'm sorry if you can't quite see the amount of time that it's there, but podcasts are up compared to this time last year by 68%. So they're up by 2/3. Homework is the second biggest thing that they're doing on a smartphone. Don't know how easy it is to do it on a smartphone with it being a small screen, but that's up 35%. And use of social media is up 26%. So whereas there's been a 10% decline in the amount of time spent playing games on a smartphone, and you can see that we had a tipping point between this year and last year where they spend more time now watching video on a smartphone than playing games. And it was always the other way around. And then the PC laptop, the thing that for years and years everybody said was gathering dust and was being put away. And to some extent it has its purposes in the household. You know, it always has lent itself to education. It's a bigger screen. Once kids get over a certain age, they become more competent in use of trackpads and mouse and so forth. So what we see with the PC laptop is that huge growth in homework time. That 3 hours 5 minutes, up from 2 hours 15 a year ago. That's a 37% increase overall. And actually, time on a PC laptop is, you know, is up 57% year on year across the course of, you know, compared to April 2019. There's been a decline still in playing games on it. You know, so we're down from 2 hours 13 to 1 hour 58. But overall, social and interaction is up around 1/4 at 24% compared to this time last year. Now, so out of that, the two things that stand out from, you know, in all of this is what's driving the growth. I haven't focused on social because we tend to only look at, we should really only look at social for 13 plus, although of course we know, and within our data, we know that, you know, children much younger than that are on social platforms, often with parents' permission. You know, one of the things we'll come to in a minute is the social platforms and how well they're doing. But overall, the big thing here is that younger children are using tablets for education and learning activities, where, you know, by the time children reach the age of 10, they're more likely to switch over to the PC laptop. And what we see overall is, if you look on the left-hand side, you can see that, you know, use of a tablet for learning and education is up by about 10% for 5 to 7s. It's up by a quarter for 8 to 10s and 11 to 15s. And when you look at PC laptop on the right-hand side of the chart, you can see that amongst the 5 to 7s, use is up by 29%, 8 to 10s, a staggering 43%, and the older children, the young teens, up 32%. So certainly we're seeing the effect of, you know, online schooling or remote schooling or use of, technology to support learning very much in the ascendancy because of the crisis. And when we look at homework and studying, it does lend itself to the right-hand side. Partly it's self-effacing because, you know, children, it's more likely older children have got the homework rather than the younger ones. But still, you know, for 5 to 10-year-olds, tablet use for homework is up by 38%. The PC laptop is up a staggering 117% for 5 to 7s, 50% for 8 to 10-year-olds, and 11 to 15s, it's up by, you know, just 10%. So in terms of, you know, kids can't play with one another, so they're using video calls to keep in touch with friends and family members, you know, playing games such as FORTNITE, you know, to, you know, via games networks to stay in touch. But the big thing I think that, you know, we're seeing from all of this is, you know, screens are bringing families, friends, kids together. And kids are doing that classic thing that we see them doing, which is adapting what technology they have to suit what they need. So no one, I'm sure, when Zoom was created, ever thought it would be connecting kids or, you know, for chats with kids or, you know, for that purpose. It was done as a, you know, an efficiency thing for work. But, you know, kids have done exactly what they did with tablets. They're making it their own. You know, they're taking advantage of the games networks. They're taking advantage of chatting games like FORTNITE to stay in touch with one another. But the thing that's interesting is it's causing parents to redefine what is screen time, because parents are seeing these other values that maybe 6 months ago, they just saw kids on YouTube and thought, yeah, my kid's becoming a YouTube zombie. Okay, turning to some of the brands that we have here, and this is in Trends. We look at a load of brands. We actually now track 200 brands that kids engage with, and that number's growing all the time. This is from a pre-coded question, so we're asking kids, do you use these brands? And then this is the proportion who say, this is the growth in daily usage. The couple of interesting things that stand out for me about this chart particularly is the trajectory of TikTok was always going to show huge increases, but it seems to be, you know, given a rocket boost by what's happened over the last, you know, 10, 12 weeks. And we're seeing it up 2/3. In the US particularly, WhatsApp isn't as big as Facebook Messenger. WhatsApp's bigger in Europe in our data. So what we're seeing is, you know, a growth in use of WhatsApp. Often families say to us, WhatsApp, well, it's a chat mechanism, you know, I can control who's in it, you know, so they feel a bit safer with it. Good growth for Messenger Kids, which of course was designed with kids in mind for families who have Facebook accounts. And again, you know, impressive growth there at 2/3 up from really, you know, not particularly rapid growth since it was launched a couple of years ago. And then the third big, then another big mover this time is Snapchat, which is, you know, up about 40% compared to a year ago. And then we have the streaming services, and we've all seen video. You've seen how share of time on that earlier chart of stream video has grown. A couple of new services have launched in the last 12 months, and unfortunately, you know, even 6 months ago when we were in field, Disney launched on early in 12th of November, I think it was, in the US. So these are the first sets of numbers which I've put in. So daily use of Disney's at Disney Plus is at 35% according to our data. That's phenomenal success. Curiosity Stream is more specialist. It's a bit like a streamed version of Discovery, come Nat Geo, and 1 in 10 are saying that they've used that daily. Hopster, which has been around a while, preschool, you know, walled garden app, you know, up 88%, and HBO Go, which you know, will probably be evolve into HBO Max with its kids offer, is up 59% compared to a year ago. But just to put it in context, that doesn't change the fact that YouTube is still the biggest platform used by kids. In fact, on a daily basis, the majority of kids are on YouTube. And you can see on the left-hand side there, that's that 55% with the growing trajectory as they get older. And it peaks with young teens. And Netflix is very similar. It starts, you know, it's around 47%, and this is daily use, remember. So this is, I used it in the last 24 hours, and it's growing, and it gets to the majority of kids by the time they're 8. And then we see a slightly different audience profile from the House of Mouse, Disney Plus, much more even, not that sort of low numbers for younger kids, higher numbers for older kids. We're seeing a much more uniform representation right up till the age of 10, and then it dips away. It'll be interesting to see whether one of the things I'll be tracking is whether, with Netflix losing a lot of the Disney material in the last 6 months, whether that will, you know, cause it to lose numbers with younger audiences whilst maintaining the older kids. So we'll be looking at that. In YouTube, Kids has a similar profile shape as does Disney Plus. And then if we move to the right-hand side, what we tend to see is Hulu is an older skew, as is Amazon Prime. It tends to be that kids start watching the video when, you know, parents have got the service and they're using the service, because obviously Prime isn't, you know, necessarily got for the video. It's more the you know, the instant delivery. So playing video games has always been a function of the amount of time that kids have available to them. I mean, one of the successes of apps on mobile has been that they're quick, snackable games. Kids can play them and they don't have to commit a large amount of time to them. But of course, the console games is a bit different. So that normally means they only, you know, that normally influences the type of games that they're playing. However, kids have got more time to play, which means they're more likely to commit to their favorite games. So that could be, you know, more time for Mario, more time for Minecraft, more time for Fortnite, more time for Roblox. And what we see here is, you know, evidence that they're actually going back to brands that have been around a while in the App Store. They're picking up Clash of Clans again, or they're picking up Sonic, you know, and they're going back to those familiar brands rather than searching for something new as they find this extra time. And then just to give some context as to the shape of the audience. So with the exception of Fortnite, and then by only the smallest margin, we see that the peak age for playing the top 6 games that we track here is 8 to 10-year-olds. And remembering the great quote that Reed Hastings, you know, put out about Netflix, where he said, "We compete with Fortnite and lose." It's worth remembering that when kids have time, they're not just thinking video, they're thinking everything, because in a kid's world, all media competes with all media, whether you're games, social, video, whatever. You're competing with everything. So, you know, 20 years ago, Cartoon Network was competing with Disney Channel and Nickelodeon. Now it's competing with everything that a kid has available to it. So just because they've turned off Teen Titans Go doesn't mean they're necessarily going to SpongeBob. They might be going to play Roblox. So one of the questions that we wondered was whether kids were actually seeking information about, you know, coronavirus. We know that in our data that, you know, when we ask kids about the things that they're interested in, you know, consuming content related to comedy, animals and wildlife, action adventure, sci-fi, fantasy, music, all top the list. And when it comes to topical and things happening now, news, current affairs, if you like, it really rates lowly. One of the things we've seen in this trend is the number of kids saying, actually, I have an interest in topical in the US has gone up from 8 to 16% in the 2 to 15s. That's a doubling. That's significant. And here what we see is the number of kids who say, yes, I'm interested in finding out more. Not surprisingly, the younger kids, the 5 to 7s, probably aren't that familiar with what's going on. They're probably not that, they've got other things that they might be interested in. But certainly when you look at the middle kingdom, those 8 to 10-year-olds and the young teens, certainly there is a thirst for knowledge about this. And where are they going? Well, I think the interesting thing here is, and this is very different, and David and I said we would contrast with say, our UK data. This is very different for the UK. One of the things that's startling is just how readily kids in the US will go to media. And if you look at the numbers of 8 to 10s there, 31% are turning to YouTube. So that's 8 to 10-year-olds, 31% turning to YouTube opposed to going to their parents, which is at 24% to find out more about coronavirus. And that's, startling, revelation from our perspective, because in other countries, generally the parent is the first person that a child will go to because the parent can give context, they know their child and they give understanding, and they know what level the child can cope with being explained something like this to. Social network, the difference between parent guardian, social networks, YouTube, and even a newspaper, TV, radio station website or other news website is very, very similar, is very, very close. And you can just see that bluey, greeny area that I've highlighted behind the chart, which shows just how influential online is in providing information for children in the US about the pandemic. And then we asked a general question about news and information, which was more a case of just really where they go for context about news and information. And, it's interesting, isn't it? When it's more general, they're talking to parents, and you'd expect that those younger children go to a trusted adult. So that's mum or dad, 50%. And the next biggest place to go is the teacher at just over a quarter. And then we see the older kids dipping into social media, but they're also turning on the NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN news apps and the like. So it's much more of a mix of talking to friends, talking to other people, but also referencing the media. So, and that, one of the things there is, we've talked about how children are reacting, but what about parents? Children look up to parents because generally parents have all the answers. But, and generally, parents have things that keep children occupied. So, soccer practice or, activities, going to see family, doing things, going out, popping into town, visiting attractions, that sort of thing. They're all closed. So children are becoming much more attached to their parents and more emotionally attached, I suppose. But parents are going through, this. We're kind of finding our way, in the darkness as well. So those anxieties that parents have, where they don't know the answers, are worried that they're implicitly communicating, I suppose, some of those reactions back to their children, and the children are sensing an atmosphere in their parents. So parents, worry about not having all the answers for their kids, and that's one of those things that as time goes on, and kids start heading back to school, that will help the situation. But right now, we're sort of seeing a world where parents are in this place where they're finding out things on a daily basis for themselves. And the kids are asking questions that are related to, you know, their safety of their grandparents and when they'll be able to see their friends. I mean, I was going through the open-ended questions in Trends, and it's quite hard how it grabs you here when, you know, a lot of the kids have been talking, when we ask them an open-ended question, what are you talking about right now? One of the things that the majority of kids are saying is, just when will I be able to spend time with my friends again?
So let me pick up here and talk about what we're seeing, what we are interpreting from all this about how the media can support kids' needs in this time. Obviously, the data that Adam's been presenting is substantially from the US, backed up by what we're seeing in the UK, where it's similar and where it's different. We know that we also have people on these calls who are from places that are not the US and UK. And I think as you look at what I'll be talking about in terms of how media can support, these can be applied across the board pretty much. These are things that you need to consider in particular right now for kids' psychological and emotional needs, but that are in some ways eternal to how we should be thinking about kids and media. I think the biggest thing that we can talk about, you possibly heard us talk before about our emotional scheduling model and this idea that kids as young as preschool really consciously organize their time around their, not just their media use, but also all the different ways that they play. And that's especially apparent here when there are changes in routines, when they're seeing the anxiety around them has kind of change the way that emotionally they're going through the day. And one of the things that kids do when they feel that emotional overwhelm is go back to things that are familiar to them. They may regress a little bit in development, or even just feel the need for something that feels comfortable for them, that feels familiar for them. So familiarity breeds contentment, the idea that you may want to look back to things that kids will find emotionally soothing. You see that I've created kind of a cascading set of bullet points here for emotional scheduling. And that's because as we've been looking at how kids choose content, when they decide, I want something, I want to watch something now, I want to play something, I want to do something, they actually go through these things almost in this order of consideration. We jokingly at times call it the Maslow-ish hierarchy of media needs, because there are things that are essential. What device do I have available now? If I'm sitting in front of my television, that's one thing. If I'm out with my mobile phone, that's another thing. So that's their first consideration, is what's available to me. How much time do I have? We find that part of emotional scheduling is I don't want to get into a game if I know I'm going to be interrupted 5 minutes from now and have to put it aside and maybe lose my progress, or just be at a crucial point in it. So kids really do think about, how much time do I have? Do I want to pick something very short, or do I have time to kind of settle into something a little bit longer right now? What have I been doing and what am I about to be doing? That's kind of a proxy for emotional state. So if you come home from school and you've been under someone else's control all day, or if you've just finished your lessons at home during lockdown and you feel like, okay, I've been under somebody else's pressure for a while, that's going to affect the kind of choices that you make. If you are about to be going to bed, that's going to affect the kinds of choices that you make. And we talk about this in terms of how kids hire media for a job that they need fulfilled. So a kid may say, I need something to get me up and excited and moving around. And that's going to be a very different kind of media from what they'll choose when it's time to settle in for bed. All those, as I say, go into what kind of mood am I in now, or what do I want my mood to be? How do I need to change it? Do I have a pathway to finding what I want? Obviously, that's a lot of what Adam was talking about, is what platforms does my family own? Do we have Amazon? Do we have Netflix? Do we have, have I got TikTok? If I don't have a Nintendo Switch, I guess it's not going to be Animal Crossing. Do I own access to it? And the last one is, do my parents approve? Not always obeyed in its, sometimes it's in the breach, not as it appears. So what can you do to ensure that your own predictability and familiarity? One thing is to create visibility. You can you really need to think about kids in this multidimensional way of not just what child am I looking to attract, but what time of day do I expect they'll really want to use this? What kind of mood are they going to be in? How much time are they likely to have to do what I'm trying to do? Can I create a version that's great for short as well as something that's good for them if they have a little bit longer? Am I trying to get them wound up? Am I trying to get them calmed down? Those kind of questions. Be predictable. YouTube tells its influencers to release content on a set and predictable schedule. And we do find that kids will wait for new content from their favorite YouTuber instead of going and looking for something new, and align with their existing schedules. Right now, things are a little more flat and constant, but holidays that kids talk about in the schoolyard, upcoming events that they talk about in the schoolyard, can you find a way to link to those? And as I was saying a minute ago, be comfortable and comforting. Look for the things that parents and kids can sit down and enjoy together, and look to bring back things that may have been on the shelf for a while, that the kids may not have seen for a while, but that as we saw the kid at the top saying, I finished YouTube, when's the next season? That they can say, oh, wow, I remember that, and I haven't seen it for a while. Another way that you can support is give your audience some control. You may also have heard us talk about Dubit's Fanatomy model. And the best short description for those who haven't heard about it before is it's kind of a tennis match between you and your audience, where you tell your audience how you view your brand, your story, your content, and they come back to you and say, yeah, but wouldn't it be really cool if, and they propose their own version of it. You've got a choice at that point. Do you want to listen to their ideas and integrate them, or do you want to say, no, that's not really what my vision is? If you open up just a little bit even and show them that you are listening, you've developed communication with them, you've developed trust with them. And as you'll see in my last slides, I think that's going to be something, that trust is going to be something that's going to be very important after lockdown to keep people with your brand if they've come to it during lockdown. How do you give your audience control? Kids love being given tools to help make something that's a favorite thing of theirs into what they want. So if you can offer digital tools so that they can be creative with your brand, so that they can write around it, they can draw around it. If you're an animated program, if you have assets that they could kind of play with on a digital storyboard and create their own artwork or create their own stories, or even just giving them a prompt that they can use to develop stories that they want to tell around your universe. And one of the things we find is that can help you extend the length of time that a fan stays with you, that kids outgrow brands at a certain point. And particularly you see that transition from the preschool to the older kids brands as kids branch out and develop their own personal passions, their own personal interests at the age where they really start diverging into different things. That's the age where we see them stop using educational apps so much that push education at you, that tell you what they want you to learn, and start to use pull media for education. They go online and they start looking for the content that sparks their interests. But if you can give them more to do, more engagement with a brand that they've loved for a long time, you can keep them with you longer. And just that box at the bottom, we have found, particularly when we were doing research around Minecraft, we really found that if a parent sees a child being actively engaged, being creative, being really deeply immersed in something, then they are more likely to say yes. We found parents who said, I don't know what they're doing in Minecraft, but I can see how engaged my child is. And so I don't set time limits on their Minecraft use. And finally, in terms of supporting kids' needs, creating shared experience. Even before the pandemic, we were seeing much more families spending time together around media, watching the primetime shows, the big budget, the talent shows, the cooking shows, even you see, I know that their Antiques Roadshow, they're watching and they're betting on whether something's going to be valuable or not. So they're turning these shows into family viewing, but also into competitions of their own. And particularly now during lockdown, we're seeing families turn to learning new skills, sometimes based on these shows, whether it's baking, cooking, things that they are seeing on television and then go off and do for themselves. And also they are looking for more free and low cost activities. Families are finding ways to get out of the house or finding ways within the house to do something that they didn't necessarily have time for before. So as you look at your own formats, at your own content, at your own storytelling, are there ways that you can make it more engaging as something that a family can do together, and ways for them to then, after the set gets turned off, to participate at home? I've never been able to find if it's really true. I've always heard that Joan Gans Cooney, the creator of Sesame Street, said that television is the one device that's more valuable after it's turned off than when it's on. I choose not to dig too deeply because I want to believe that she really said it. And that's a case here, is can you give families something to do after they've turned off the television, or after they've turned off the device? So I want to close with some of the things that we see as the questions that we're asking now and going to be asking in terms of the long-term implications. As I said, until we know if this is weeks, months, year, it's really hard to know exactly the questions to ask. But I think there are things that we need to start asking ourselves now to begin planning. Are kids going to go back to the ways that they did things before? Are they, not just kids, but is the media around society going to go back to the way things were done before? We're seeing the shift from putting things in cinemas, which are closed, to debuting them on television, straight to the home. How long will it be before a family wants to go back and sit in a movie theater? How long will it be before they are ready to go out and go shopping in a shopping mall? All these things influence the kind of content that we should be looking to create, and what our plans, our economic plans, financial plans are for distributing it. As I mentioned a minute ago, families are trying to spend less on things that aren't essential. So are they going to come back to the ways they spent money before, or are they going to say, you know what, we really kind of like going for walks together. We really kind of like just staying home and playing board games. And what will that mean for the media industry? We are hearing some parents talk about how they're trying to make this kind of a special time. They're trying to not, indicate to their kids, we'll go back to normal when this is done, just so that kids don't feel quite so at sea about, is this going to be a change for the rest of my life? So some families are kind of creating this as, trying to treat this as a bubble. What platforms do we think are going to come out of this stronger than they went in? And I think, we've talked about some of them, this idea of recreating things that you do in normal situations, but in a new way for lockdown. The way that kids are having birthday parties in ROBLOX, the way that FORTNITE's hip hop concert that drew millions and millions of kids. The people who are saying, well, if I can't do my usual highly produced show, I'll just do a live performance. I'll do a live reading. I'll do something informal that kids can really connect with. Those are as I say, that's going to develop that kind of trust and openness that you have with your audience. And they'll appreciate that when they come back, that you were there for them. At the bottom, it's kind of defined there as responsive brands, a brand where someone feels like, oh, somebody's home there. Somebody's really listening. I think Adam mentioned some that this idea of kids looking for nonfiction content, looking for news. So what will happen with nonfiction storytelling? In the US, NBC has launched its News for Kids. Will that stick around after the pandemic? Will they realize that kids really are hungry to know what's going on in the world around them? Or will it disappear? Engaging kids as citizens. I don't know if you've seen some of the examples of prime ministers around the world who are speaking directly to the child audience, who are holding press conferences with kids, or who are giving speeches directly to children. I think children will appreciate being treated with respect, being treated as intelligent, and being treated as kids who are, we know that these things are on their mind. And then, and then is there a way to help them think through it? What's going to happen with social and physical play? The kids are prevented from this now. I see a lot of kids outside in my neighborhood, but not playing with each other. They're just running around with their parents. everything that we have seen in our research says kids are really hungry to get back together with their friends, to spend time with other kids. So we're kind of predicting that when lockdown ends in different places, there's going to be this rebound of kids so eager to get out and see their friends that they're going to put aside their devices for a while and go out and play with friends, tag, jump rope, basketball, all these things that they haven't been able to do, sharing a playground. And the advice that we're giving people is don't take it personally. They'll come back to you. But they need this time to kind of say, okay, I've been with media for the last couple months. I just need to get outside for a while. And one of the questions that we're asking about parents is, you know, we've seen the shrinking space that kids have for their own freedom. Will parents give them more space as they come out of lockdown? Will they allow them more freedom? Finally, what's going to happen to the surge of learning content? Schools, educational broadcasters, streamers, educational media companies, digital companies have all had to go very quickly to figuring out how to offer education up to kids. What of that will they keep when they're done, and what was only for this time? How will they decide if kids were really engaged by it? And what we predict, I think, is that when kids go back to school, they will have done so much learning on their own that they will be more interested in project-based learning, in team-based learning, in pursuing their own passions, and schools will have to adapt to that. But also that the educational media offerings that will succeed over time are going to be the ones that really appealed to kids' own curiosity, that gave them a prompt, gave them tools, and let them go off and really invent for themselves. And I'm going to close with the bad news for educational media content creators, and that is kids have figured us out. This is an actual parent we talked to in the UK with a 3-year-old, remarkable 3-year-old, who said, "What are you learning about?" And the 3-year-old said, "I'm not learning anything. It's a video. It just goes by itself." So a kid at 3 who's realized that the true learning comes from that give and take. Here's the way to contact us. As was said at the beginning, if you send an email to Adam or myself, we're happy to send you the deck. My email address, I believe, is being posted in the chat even as we speak. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maria to share some of your questions that I hope we can answer.
Hello. Hi. Okay, so we have a number of questions that are coming up quickly, and just wanted to let everyone know that if your question isn't answered now, it will definitely be answered and posted on the websites of the CMA, the YMA, and the Dubit blog site. So one big question that a number of people have been asking. They've been asking about the sample size used for this study. Where are the kids and families that you are, I guess, polling for the study? And there are a lot of questions about the socioeconomic backgrounds. If children and families with poor internet connection and are unable to get to computers and technology, are they a part of the study?
So we do 2,000 2 to 15-year-olds in the US every April and October, as David said. In the UK, it's 1,300, slightly smaller base, different population. We ensure a good spread of socioeconomic groups. We make sure that we're talking to low-income families, middle-income families, high-income families. We want to get a true representation. The caveat I'll give you is, when I got into research 30 years ago, most research was done knocking on people's doors or standing in the street and stopping every 17th person. The research has moved very much online with the internet, and we conduct our surveys through panel companies that people register for. Within that, the panel companies have huge samples. I mean, our partners in the US have over 1.5 million members to tap into. Many of those are parents with kids. They have a broad section of of respondents, but the point that I'll say is that it is panel members. If you're not on the panel, if you're not on any panel, we'll never ever talk to you. Doing research the old-fashioned way, i.e. in the street or knocking on people's doors, is hugely expensive. But this is a robust representative sample of the US audience and the UK audience and all the other countries, and we work really hard to ensure that it's not skewed, it's appropriate to what we call nationally representative. So we look at the US Census data that's updated on an annual basis and ensure that if 48% of kids are female, then we will make sure that 48% of our respondents fall in that group. And we do a lot of physical quoting to ensure that happens, which is why our survey lasts roughly a month to be completed.
How was the COVID-19 switch to online school factored in? There was suddenly several hours per day for kids, for some kids.
The one thing that I've heard from companies is that, you know, we track across the day as well. And we used to see this kind of spike early in the morning as kids were getting ready to go to school, very low and flat across the day until they got home from school. And then this big jump after school of media consumption on all platforms. We talk about that afternoon time just after school as the Bermuda Triangle of media, because everything goes on. And the companies I'm talking to are saying it now is flat across the day. 6 to 9 a.m., there's as much use as 6 to 9 p.m., and it really just kind of tracks flat across the day. But it's a hard question to answer also in that the home at school, school at home experience has been so different in different places. So schools had so little time to develop a plan for this that we really did see in some places kids were getting intensive online class time and as well as assignments to do away from the screen. And in some places, I know that the teenager in our house was getting basically 10-minute classes and a load of homework. So it's a little hard to say how it's affected media use.
The focus has been on media designed for children, but in a lockdown with everyone in close quarters, has there been any research done on ambient media like Fox News, CNN, or family, like standard broadcasters?
Yes, I mean, it wasn't part of the presentation, but one of the things that David and I have worked on since, you know, the last couple of years is one of the things we've noticed is with fewer TV screens in homes, you know, if you think back to when I was a kid, there was a TV in every room. You know, it was that rite of passage. Now the rite of passage is getting one of these things. So we've seen this, you know, families coming together more in the living room or the den to watch the same sort of content. So kids are as likely, you know, to be watching Animal Planet with dad, or, you know, Top Gear with, you know, with an uncle or granddad or something, as they are watching Nickelodeon these days. So yes, so within Trends, we do track all programming, all media. So we will have the data on use of CNN, use of Fox News, use of MSNBC, use of, you know, the broadcast networks in the US as well. So we have all of that. And we also track the programs. One of the great things of doing Trends the way we do it, where we have a lot of open-ended questions, is we're getting information from the kids rather than giving them information that we already know. So in other words, we ask them to name the TV shows they're watching. We ask them to name the apps they're using. And that way we can find out these spikes. We can see whether actually they're turning on news channels more than they did 12 months ago.
And I think something that Adam was saying there also relates to a question I see in the chat about reliance on online media as opposed to parents. That, as he mentioned, the rite of passage used to be getting the television in your room, and now it's getting the smartphone, which gives you access to everything, everywhere, all the time. So kids are getting access to a lot of different sources of news, of opinion. It makes media literacy education so much more important. Full disclosure, I'm on the board of the National Association for Media Literacy Education, but just in general, because kids have access to the world of information and are at a young age can't always discern what matches their family's values, much less what is true and honest and what has a motivation, a certain motivation behind it, it becomes that much more important.
Actually, this someone asked a follow-up here about watching CNN or Fox. I'm very intrigued by that. Are they watching, or are they watching, is it in the background, or maybe you don't know that?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's like what, you know, I've worked in radio and TV in my career, and it's like we always used to have the argument that if someone walks into a gas station to pay their bill and the radio's blaring out, is the radio just on or are they listening? If they had an electronic measuring device, it would pick up that they were actually there and therefore they would be counting in the listening. If they had a diary, they probably wouldn't recall it. I dispute the thing that no child is going to say, I'm watching CNN or Fox. No kid is going to wear the badge of CNN or Fox. I totally agree with. But children, we find, are extremely honest. And actually, brands, they're more likely to they're more likely to tell stories that they're not watching Nick Jr. or a brand that they perceive to be babyish than they are a brand that they see as, you know, a bit more adult, a bit more grown up. And, you know, in the questioning, and we have to assume that children are honest, that they have a lot of boxes to fill out, that if, you know, and CNN did a great Sesame Street town hall. I mean, we read about it over here. They've said they're doing another one, making context, you know, with their medical expert, and I think, and Big Bird thought it was brilliant. Why wouldn't a kid who's seen that put CNN? You know, I would throw that out. Then it's not a brand not to be proud of.
Tell you what, let's say that we will answer further questions in writing. Let me take just a minute to again thank the CMA and the YMA for partnering on this, and for all the good work that they do all the time for the children's media communities in the US and Canada and beyond. And Chantal, let me turn it over to you if you wanted to say a few words in closing.
Well, I just want to say thank you, David and Adam, for your collaboration, and Stephanie as well. Maybe it's the beginning of a new trend, Stephanie.
Definitely, that would be wonderful. Yeah, thank you to everybody. And also for Children's Media Association, just a reminder, those 3 months of free membership, if everybody wants to sign up, it's www.childrensmediaassociation.org.
Very good. And Adam's and my email were in the chat, david.kleeman@dubitlimited.com, adam.woodgate@dubitlimited.com. We look forward to continued conversation with you all. Thank you so much for coming today, and everybody please be well.